Monsieur le Président, Madame la Présidente du Conseil, Mesdames et Messieurs les députés, bonjour. Parfois, l'histoire avance avec discrétion et à pas compter et prend congé rapidement. Tel est le cas lorsqu'il s'agit de l'action d'une commission qui ne dispose que d'un mandat de 5 années pour changer définitivement les choses. Mais sur un laps de temps aussi court, on ne peut pas changer définitivement les choses. La Commission actuelle, comme ses prédécesseurs, est un épisode, un bref moment dans la longue histoire de l'Union européenne. L'heure du bilan définitif de la Commission que je préside n'est pas encore venue. Donc, je ne vous présenterai pas aujourd'hui un bilan de ce que nous avons pu faire au cours des 4 années écoulées. Au contraire, je vous dis que le travail continue pendant les mois à venir pour faire de l'Union européenne imparfaite une Union européenne chaque jour plus parfaite. Il reste des choses à faire et c'est de là que je voudrais vous parler ce matin. Pas d'autosatisfaction, pas de torse bombé, modestie et travail. Voilà l'attitude que la Commission fera sienne. Voilà notre agenda pour les mois à venir. Parfois l'histoire au véritable sens du terme, s'invite dans la vie des nations sans préavis et tarte à la quitter. Tel fut le cas au moment de la Grande Guerre, qui en 1914 a pris le continent par surprise, tellement fut ensoleillé, calme, paisible, optimiste l'année 1913. En 1913, les Européens s'attendaient à vivre durablement en paix. Et pourtant, une guerre fratricide déferla sur l'Europe l'année suivante. Je fais référence à cette période, non pas parce que je croirais que nous serions au seuil d'une nouvelle catastrophe en Europe. L'Union européenne est garante de paix. Soyons heureux de vivre sur un continent de paix, un continent qui connaît la paix grâce à l'Union européenne. Respectons donc mieux l'Union européenne. Ne salissons pas son image. Défendons notre façon d'être et notre façon de vivre. Disons oui au patriotisme qui n'est pas dirigé contre les autres. Disons non au nationalisme surfait qui rejette et qui déteste les autres, qui détruit, qui cherche des coupables, au lieu de chercher des solutions qui nous permettent de mieux vivre ensemble. Le pacte fondateur de l'Union européenne, plus jamais la guerre, reste une ardente exigence, une ardente obligation de vigilance qui s'impose chez nous et autour de nous. Mesdames et Messieurs les députés, quel est l'état de l'Union européenne aujourd'hui, en 2018? 10 ans après Lehman Brothers, l'Europe a largement tourné la page de la crise économique et financière qui nous est venue d'ailleurs et qui nous a frappés d'une façon très souvent brutale. L'Union européenne a connu une croissance ininterrompue depuis 21 trimestres. L'emploi reprend des couleurs, avec près de 12 millions d'emplois créés depuis 1914. 12 millions d'emplois, c'est plus que la population de la Belgique. Jamais autant de personnes, 239 millions d'hommes et de femmes, n'ont été au travail en Europe. Le chômage des jeunes s'élève à 14,8%. Ce chiffre reste trop élevé, mais il se situe à son plus bas niveau depuis 2000. L'investissement est de retour en Europe. grâce notamment à notre Fonds européen pour les investissements stratégiques, que certains, de plus en plus rares, continuent à appeler le plan Juncker, plan qui a généré 335 milliards d'euros d'investissements publics et privés. Et nous sommes en marche vers les 400 milliards. Et puis, il y a la Grèce. Après des années, il faut dire, douloureuses, après de graves problèmes sociaux sans précédent, la Grèce a réussi à mener à bien son programme et à se remettre sur pied. Je salue une fois de plus les efforts herculéens du peuple grec, efforts que les autres Européens continuent à sous-estimer. J'ai toujours défendu, et vous le savez, la Grèce, sa dignité, son rôle en Europe et notamment son maintien au sein de la zone euro. J'en reste fier. L'Europe a aussi réaffirmé son statut de puissance commerciale. La puissance commerciale mondiale, qui est la nôtre, n'est rien d'autre que la preuve de la nécessité de partager nos souverainetés. L'Union européenne a aujourd'hui des accords commerciaux avec 70 pays. Ensemble, nous représentons 40% du PIB mondial. Ces accords, je parle des accords commerciaux, très souvent en matière de sécurité alimentaire, en matière des droits des travailleurs, en matière environnementale et en matière des droits des consommateurs. Lorsqu'en juillet dernier, au cours d'une dangereuse période ouverte, mais non pas comme un continent offert. Fort de l'unité européenne que j'ai pu exposer en principe et en détail, j'ai pu faire entendre la voix de l'Union européenne pour obtenir des résultats concrets pour nos citoyens et pour nos entreprises. Unis, nous, Européens, sommes, en tant qu'Union, devenus une force incontournable. À Washington, j'ai parlé au nom de l'Europe. Certains décrivent l'accord, l'arrangement que j'ai pu obtenir à l'issue de mes négociations avec le président Trump comme une surprise. Or, il n'y a pas eu de surprise parce qu'à chaque fois que l'Europe parle d'une seule voix, la surprise n'existe pas. Elle peut, si elle veut, et si elle parle d'une seule voix, s'imposer aux autres. L'Europe, là où c'est nécessaire, doit agir comme un seul homme. Nous l'avons prouvé lorsque nous n'avons cessé de défendre l'accord de Paris sur le climat, parce que nous, Européens, nous voulons laisser aux prochaines générations une planète plus propre. Je partage les analyses de notre commissaire à l'énergie en ce qui concerne les objectifs de réduction d'émissions de CO2 pour 2030. Elles sont scientifiquement exactes et politiquement nécessaires. La sécheresse de cet été ont rappelé avec brutalité, non seulement aux agriculteurs, l'importance de ces efforts qui sont les nôtres pour assurer la sauvegarde de l'avenir des générations futures. On peut évidemment ne pas vouloir voir le défi climatique et regarder ailleurs. Nous, Commission, et vous, Parlement, nous devons de regarder vers l'avenir. Mesdames et Messieurs, le monde qui n'arrête pas de tourner est devenu plus volatile que jamais. Les défis extérieurs auxquels notre continent doit faire face se multiplient jour après jour. Nous ne pouvons donc pas relâcher, ne serait-ce qu'une seconde, nos efforts pour bâtir une Europe plus unie et plus forte. L'Europe peut exporter sa stabilité, comme nous l'avons fait avec les élargissements successifs de notre Union. Élargissements qui, pour moi, sont et restent des succès parce que nous avons réussi à réconcilier géographie et histoire européenne. Mais il reste des efforts à faire. Nous devons définir d'une façon irrévocable notre attitude pour ce qui est de leur adhésion à l'égard des pays des Balkans occidentaux. Autrement, d'autres se chargeront de façonner notre voisinage immédiat. Regardons autour de nous ce qui se passe à l'heure où nous sommes en Syrie, à Idlib, doit être pour nous tous une cause de préoccupation profonde et immédiate. Nous ne pouvons pas rester silencieux face à l'imminence d'un désastre humanitaire qui, en fait, est un désastre annoncé. Le conflit syrien illustre comment l'ordre international dont les Européens ont su bénéficier depuis la Deuxième Guerre mondiale est de plus en plus remis en cause. Pour le reste, dans le monde d'aujourd'hui, l'Europe ne peut plus avoir l'assurance que les engagements qui furent pris hier seront encore tenus demain. Les alliances d'hier ne sont peut-être plus les alliances de demain. Je le disais, le monde d'aujourd'hui a besoin d'une Europe forte et unie. Une Europe qui travaille en faveur de la paix, d'accords commerciaux et de relations monétaires stables, même si d'autres, ailleurs, sont trop enclins à choisir les guerres commerciales, voire monétaires. En fait, je n'aime pas cet unilatéralisme irrespectueux des attentes et des espoirs des autres. Je resterai toujours un multilatéraliste convaincu. Si l'Europe se rendait mieux compte de sa puissance politique, de la puissance économique et parfois militaire de ces nations, nous pourrions abandonner le rôle exclusif de payeur global, chose que de toute façon nous voulons rester. Nous devons devenir davantage un acteur global. Yes, we are global players, but we have to be global players too. C'est la raison pour laquelle, en dépit d'une forte résistance à l'époque, j'ai relancé dès 2014 l'Union européenne de la défense. C'est pourquoi, dans les prochains mois, la Commission continuera à travailler pour que le Fonds européen de défense et la coopération permanente structurée dans le domaine de la défense deviennent pleinement opérationnels. Une précision. Une précision importante à mes yeux à cet endroit. Nous ne militariserons pas l'Union européenne. Ce que nous voulons, c'est de devenir plus responsable et plus indépendant. Parce que seule une Europe forte et unie peut protéger nos citoyens des menaces intérieures et extérieures, du terrorisme au changement climatique. Seule une Europe forte et unie peut préserver les emplois dans un monde ouvert et interconnecté. Seule une Europe forte et unie peut maîtriser les défis de la numérisation mondiale. Nous, Européens, parce que nous sommes le plus grand marché unique au monde, nous pouvons établir des normes pour les mégadonnées, pour l'intelligence artificielle, pour l'automatisation, tout en défendant nos valeurs, les droits et l'individualité de nos citoyens. Nous pouvons le faire à condition que nous soyons unis. Une Europe forte et unie permet à ses États membres de décrocher les étoiles. C'est grâce à notre programme Galileo que l'Europe reste dans la course à l'espace. Aucun État membre, aucun, n'aurait pu mettre en orbite 26 satellites dont bénéficient déjà aujourd'hui 400 millions d'utilisateurs dans le monde. Aucun État membre n'y serait parvenu seul. Galileo, oui, est un succès d'abord, sinon exclusivement européen. Sans l'Europe, pas de Galileo. Soyons-en fiers. Monsieur le Président, la géopolitique nous apprend que l'heure de la souveraineté européenne a définitivement sonné. L'heure pour l'Europe de prendre entre ses mains son destin. L'heure pour l'Europe de développer ce que j'ai appelé Weltpolitikfähigkeit, cette capacité à jouer notre rôle pour prendre de l'influence sur les cours des choses mondiales. L'Europe doit devenir davantage un acteur souverain dans les relations internationales. La souveraineté européenne provient de la souveraineté nationale de nos États membres. Elle ne remplace pas ce qui est propre aux nations. Partager nos souverainetés là où il le faut rend chacun de nos États et de nos nations plus forts. Cette conviction qu'unis nous sommes plus grands est l'essence même de ce que veut dire faire partie de l'Union européenne. La souveraineté européenne ne sera jamais dirigée contre les autres. L'Europe doit rester un continent d'ouverture et de tolérance, et elle va le rester. L'Europe ne sera jamais une forteresse tournant le dos au monde, et notamment au monde qui souffre. L'Europe ne sera jamais une île. L'Europe doit et va rester multilatérale, parce que la planète appartient à tous et non pas seulement à quelques-uns. Tel est aussi l'enjeu des élections au Parlement européen qui auront lieu en mai 2019. Nous mettrons à profit les 250 jours qui nous séparent des élections européennes pour apporter à nos concitoyens la preuve que lorsque nous agissons ensemble, l'Union européenne peut obtenir des résultats et qu'elle respecte les engagements que nous avons pris en début de ce mandat. D'ici les élections européennes, nous devons démontrer que l'Europe peut surmonter les différences entre le Nord et le Sud, l'Est et l'Ouest. L'Union européenne, l'Europe, est trop petite pour se diviser un jour en deux, le lendemain en quatre. Nous devons démontrer qu'ensemble, Est, Ouest, Sud et Nord, nous pouvons semer les graines d'une Europe plus souveraine. Herr Präsident, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, wenn wir im Mai 2019 zur Wahl schreiten, wird es die Bürger Europas nicht interessieren, was die Kommission vorgeschlagen hat. Aber es wird sie in hohem Maß interessieren, dass die Internetgiganten dort Steuern zahlen, wo sie ihre Gewinne erwirtschaften. Die Wähler wollen, viele von Ihnen auch, nicht alle, wie ich weiß, die Wähler wollen, dass der diesbezügliche Vorschlag der Kommission rasch zum Gesetz wird. Die das wollen, haben absolut recht. Wenn die Europäer 2019 wählen, wird sie weniger der gute Wille der Kommission begeistern, gegen Einwegplastik vorzugehen, um unsere Meere zu schützen. Wenn wir die Europäer von uns selbst und von der Richtigkeit unseres Tuns überzeugen wollen, dann brauchen wir ein europäisches Gesetz, das das Plastikverbot zementiert. Wir alle erklären, meistens in Sonntagsreden, dass wir in großen Fragen ehrgeiziger und in kleinen Fragen bescheidener sein sollten. Doch die Europäer im Mai 2019 werden nicht applaudieren, wenn wir weiterhin zweimal im Jahr aufgrund europäischer Regulierungen die Zeit umstellen müssen. Die Zeitumstellung gehört abgeschafft. Die Mitgliedstaaten, dieses Angebot der Subsidiarität, sollten selbst entscheiden, ob ihre Bürger in der Sommer- oder Winterzeit leben sollen. Ich erwarte, dass Parlament und Rat dies ebenso sehen und dafür sorgen werden, dass regionale, binnenmarktkonforme Lösungen gefunden werden. Die Zeit drängt. Überhaupt rufe ich uns alle dazu auf, in den kommenden Monaten eng zusammenzuarbeiten, damit wir das, was wir 2014 versprochen hatten, rechtzeitig vor den Europawahlen einlösen können. Als wir angetreten sind, haben wir alle gemeinsam versprochen, einen innovativen digitalen Binnenmarkt, eine vertiefte Wirtschafts- und Währungsunion, eine Bankenunion, eine Kapitalmarktunion, einen fairen Binnenmarkt, eine Energieunion mit einer zukunftsorientierten Klimapolitik, eine umfassende Migrationsagenda, eine Sicherheitsunion zu verwirklichen. Und wir haben uns, jedenfalls die meisten von uns, vorgenommen, die soziale Dimension Europas nicht weiter stiefmütterlich zu behandeln, sondern in Richtung Zukunft aufzustellen. Die Kommission hat alle Vorschläge schon von Rat und Parlament verabschiedet. 20% sind auf einem guten Weg und 30% stecken in teilweise schwierigen Beratungen. Sündenböcke sitzen in allen Institutionen, die wenigsten davon in der Kommission und im Parlament. Führung auf breitester Front bleibt angesagt. Dies trifft auch in puncto Vollendung unserer Sicherheitsunion zu. Die Europäer erwarten zu Recht, dass die Europäische Union sie beschützt und schützt. Deshalb schlägt die Kommission heute neue Regeln vor, um terroristische Propaganda binnen einer Stunde aus dem Internet zu entfernen. Eine Stunde ist nämlich das entscheidende Zeitfenster, während dessen Öffnung größter Schaden entstehen kann. Zudem schlagen wir vor, die Aufgaben der neu geschaffenen Europäischen Staatsanwaltschaft auf die Bekämpfung terroristischer Taten auszuweiten. Wir müssen Terroristen unionsweit und grenzüberschreitend verfolgen können. Terroristen kennen keine Grenzen. Wir sollten uns durch Nichtzusammenarbeit nicht zu ihren Komplizen machen. Aus diesem Grund schlagen wir heute auch neue Maßnahmen vor, um effektiv und grenzüberschreitend gegen Geldwäsche vorgehen zu können. Genauso entschlossen müssen wir vorgehen, um freie und faire Wahlen in Europa sicherzustellen. Deshalb schlägt die Kommission neue Regeln vor, um unsere demokratischen Prozesse gegen Manipulation durch Drittstaaten und auch, ja, das gibt es, massiv gebündelte private Interessen abzusichern. Führung, Kompromisswillen sind natürlich ganz besonders in Migrationsfragen dringend geboten. Wir haben hier mehr Fortschritte gemacht, als oft behauptet wird. 5 von 7 Kommissionsvorschläge zur Neugestaltung unseres gemeinsamen europäischen Asylsystems wurden angenommen. Unsere Anstrengungen haben Erfolg gezeigt. Es gibt 97% weniger Flüchtlinge im östlichen Mittelmeerraum und um 80% weniger Flüchtlinge entlang der zentralen Mittelmeerroute. EU-Einsätze trugen seit 2015 zur Rettung von mehr als 690.000 Menschen auf hoher See bei. Allerdings haben die Mitgliedstaaten noch nicht das richtige Verhältnis zwischen Verantwortung eines jeden Landes für sein eigenes Hoheitsgebiet und der nötigen Solidarität untereinander gefunden. Diese Solidarität müssen die Mitgliedstaaten aber an den Tag legen, wenn sie den Schengen-Raum ohne Binnengrenzen erhalten wollen. Ich bin und bleibe gegen Binnengrenzen. Sie müssen dort, wo es sie inzwischen wieder gibt, abgeschafft werden. Blieben sie erhalten. wäre dies ein nicht akzeptabler Rückschritt europäischen Seins und Werdens. Die Kommission und mehrere Ratspräsidentschaften haben zahlreiche Vorschläge zur Migration vorgelegt. Ich fordere die österreichische Ratspräsidentschaft auf, und sie wird dies auch tun, jetzt entscheidende Schritte einzuleiten, um zukunftsfähige Lösungen für eine ausgewogene Migrationsreform zu erarbeiten. Wir können nicht bei der Ankunft jedes neuen Schiffes weiter über Ad-hoc-Lösungen für die Menschen an Bord streiten. Ad-hoc-Lösungen reichen nicht aus. Wir brauchen vielmehr mehr Gegenwarts- und Zukunftssolidarität. Solidarität muss von Dauer sein und sie muss auch organisiert werden. Wir brauchen auch mehr Solidarität, weil wir mehr Effizienz brauchen. Dies trifft auch zu, wenn es darum geht, einen verstärkten europäischen Katastrophenschutz in die Wege zu leiten. Wenn es in einem Land brennt, dann brennt es überall in Europa. Zu den eindrucksvollen Bildern des Sommers gehören nicht nur die Brände, sondern auch der Applaus, den vom Feuer bedrohte Schweden den solidarisch helfenden polnischen Feuerwehrleuten gespendet haben. Europe at its best. Zurück zur Migration. Wir legen heute einen Vorschlag zur Stärkung des europäischen Grenz- und Küstenschutzes vor. Außengrenzen müssen effizienter geschützt werden. Deshalb schlagen wir vor, die Zahl europäischer Grenzschutzbeamten, die vom europäischen Haushalt finanziert werden, bis zum Jahre 2020 auf 10.000 Grenzschützer zu erhöhen. Wir legen zudem einen Vorschlag zum Ausbau der Europäischen Asylagentur vor. Mitgliedstaaten brauchen stärkere europäische Unterstützung bei der Bearbeitung von Asylanträgen. Eine Bearbeitung, die im Einklang mit der Genfer Konvention zu stehen hat. Und wir legen einen Vorschlag vor, um die Rückführung irregulär eingereister Migranten zu beschleunigen. Ich wiederhole hier im Parlament meinen Wunsch, der einer Aufforderung gleichkommt, legale Einwanderungswege in die Europäische Union zu öffnen. Wir brauchen qualifizierte Migranten. Auch hierzu liegen die Kommissionsvorschläge seit langem auf dem Tisch. Bitte umsetzen. Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs les députés, je voudrais vous parler de l'avenir et donc de notre continent cousin qu'est l'Afrique. D'ici à 2050, l'Afrique comptera 2,5 milliards d'habitants. Une personne sur 4 sera africaine. Nous devons investir davantage dans nos relations avec ce grand et noble continent et ses nations individuelles. Et nous devons arrêter d'envisager cette relation africano-européenne dans la seule perspective d'un donneur d'aide au développement. Une telle approche serait insuffisante, en fait humiliante pour l'Afrique. L'Afrique n'a pas besoin de charité. Elle a besoin d'un partenariat équilibré, d'un vrai partenariat. Et nous, Européens, nous avons besoin au même titre de ce partenariat. En préparant ce discours, j'ai parlé avec mes amis africains, notamment avec le président Kagame, président de l'Union africaine. Nous sommes tombés d'accord pour dire qu'à l'avenir, nos engagements respectifs doivent être réciproques. Nous voulons construire un nouveau partenariat avec l'Afrique. La Commission propose aujourd'hui une nouvelle alliance entre l'Afrique et l'Europe, une alliance pour des investissements et pour des emplois durables. Cette alliance, telle que nous l'envisageons, permettrait de créer jusqu'à 10 millions d'emplois en Afrique au cours des 5 prochaines années. Et nous voulons créer un cadre permettant d'attirer davantage d'investissements privés vers l'Afrique. À vrai dire, nous ne partons pas de zéro. Notre fonds d'investissement extérieur, lancé ici même il y a 2 ans, mobilisera plus de 44 milliards d'euros d'investissement dans le secteur public et privé en Afrique. Les projets prévus, les projets engagés mobiliseront aujourd'hui 24 milliards d'euros. Nous concentrerons nos investissements dans les domaines où les investissements font une véritable différence. D'ici à 2020, l'Union européenne aura soutenu 35 000 étudiants et chercheurs africains grâce à notre programme Erasmus remusclé. Jusqu'en 2027, ce chiffre sera porté à 105 000. Le commerce entre l'Europe et l'Afrique n'est pas sans importance. 36% du commerce de l'Afrique se fait d'ores et déjà avec l'Union européenne. Mais les échanges commerciaux entre nous ne sont pas suffisants. Je suis convaincu que nous devrions faire évoluer les nombreux accords commerciaux entre les pays africains et l'Union européenne vers un accord de libre-échange de continent à continent, un partenariat économique entre partenaires égaux. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, another issue where I see a strong need for the Union for leadership is Brexit. I will not enter into the details of the negotiations, which are being masterfully ended by my friend Michel Barnier. He works on the basis of a unanimous position confirmed time and again by the 27 member states. However, allow me to recall 3 principles which should guide our work on Brexit in the months to come. First of all, we respect, of course, the British decision to leave our union. Yeah. But we regret it deeply, as you are. But we also ask the British government to understand that someone who leaves the union cannot be in the same privileged position as a member state. If you leave the union, you are, of course, no longer part of our single market, and certainly not only in parts of it. Secondly, the European Commission, this Parliament, and all other member states will always show loyalty and solidarity with Ireland when it comes to the Irish border. This is why we want to find a creative solution that prevents a hard border in Northern Ireland. And we will defend all the elements of the Good Friday Agreement. It is Brexit that is making the border more visible in Northern Ireland. It's not the European Union. Thirdly, after the 29th of March 2019, the United Kingdom will never be an ordinary third country for us. The United Kingdom will always be a very close neighbor and partner in political, economic, and security terms. In the past months, when we needed unity in the Union, Britain was at our side, driven by the same values and principles of all other Europeans. This is why I welcome Prime Minister May's proposal to develop an ambitious new partnership for the future after Brexit. We agree with the statement made in Chequers that the starting point for such a partnership should be a free trade area between the United Kingdom and the European Union. On the basis of these principles, the Commission's negotiators, mainly my good friend Michel Barnier, stand ready to work day and night to reach a deal. We owe it to our citizens and our businesses to ensure the United Kingdom's withdrawal is orderly and that there is stability afterwards. It will not be the Commission that will stand in the way of this. Mesdames et Messieurs les députés, d'ici les élections européennes et d'ici au sommet qui aura lieu le 9 mai de l'année prochaine en Roumanie, beaucoup de travail reste à faire. À Sibiu, il faudra convaincre nos concitoyens que sur l'essentiel, nous partageons la même conception de la finalité de notre Union. Les peuples n'aiment pas les incertitudes ni les finalités diffuses. Ils aiment des indications claires, ils détestent les à peu près et les demi-mesures. Alors n'offrons pas des demi-mesures aux citoyens européens. Tout cela constitue l'agenda européen sur la route vers Sibiu. D'ici Sibiu, nous devons ratifier l'accord de partenariat entre l'Union européenne et le Japon, pour des raisons, oui, économiques, mais aussi géopolitiques. D'ici le sommet de Sibiu, nous avons pour devoir de négocier un accord de principe sur le budget de l'Union européenne après 2020. Si nous voulons, il faudra que nous le fassions, donner aux jeunes Européens la chance d'exploiter au maximum les possibilités offertes par le programme Erasmus, qui mérite de disposer de plus de moyens de financement. Il faudra que nous décidions de cette enveloppe comme d'autres enveloppes. Si nous voulons donner plus d'opportunités à nos chercheurs, à nos start-ups, pour éviter qu'un manque de ressources conduise à une réduction drastique du nombre des postes de chercheurs, il faudra décider sur le budget avant les élections européennes. Si nous voulons, sans nous militariser, multiplier par 20 les dépenses en matière de défense, nous devons décider avant les élections européennes. Si nous voulons consacrer 23% d'investissement de plus pour l'Afrique, il faudra décider rapidement. On me dit toujours, chef d'État, ministre, parlementaires européens et nationaux, qu'on ne peut pas décider avant les élections. Comme si les élections seraient une crise de démocratie. Non, il est normal en démocratie d'avoir des élections et il est normal, urgent de décider avant les élections pour montrer la voie à ceux qui sont supposés nous aider. D'ici l'année prochaine, nous aurons aussi à développer davantage le rôle international de l'euro. Après seulement 20 années d'existence et en dépit des voies déclinistes qui nous ont accompagnés sur ce trajet, l'euro a déjà un riche parcours derrière lui. L'euro est devenu la deuxième monnaie mondiale. Elle est la deuxième monnaie après le dollar. 60 pays lient d'une manière ou d'une autre leur propre monnaie à l'euro. Mais nous devons faire plus pour permettre à notre monnaie unique de jouer pleinement son rôle sur la scène internationale. Des événements récents ont mis en lumière la nécessité d'approfondir notre union économique et monétaire et de construire des marchés de capitaux liquides et profonds. De nombreuses propositions de la Commission en ce domaine n'attendent qu'à être adoptées. Nous devons et nous pouvons aller plus loin. Il est aberrant que l'Europe règle 80% de sa facture d'importation d'énergie, qui s'élève à 300 milliards d'euros par an, en dollars américains, alors que 2% seulement de nos importations d'énergie nous proviennent des États-Unis. Il est aberrant, ridicule, que les compagnies européennes achètent des avions européens en dollars et non pas en euros. Il faut changer tout cela. C'est la raison pour laquelle la Commission présentera, avant la fin de l'année, des initiatives pour renforcer le rôle international de l'euro. L'euro doit devenir l'instrument actif de la nouvelle souveraineté européenne. Et pour cela, la première chose à faire est de mettre notre maison en œuvre, en renforçant et en approfondissant l'union économique et monétaire, comme nous avons d'ailleurs commencé à le faire. Sans une union économique et monétaire approfondie, nous manquerons d'arguments crédibles pour renforcer le rôle international de l'euro. Nous devons parachever l'union économique et monétaire pour que l'Europe et l'euro puissent devenir plus forts. Et toujours sur la voie vers Sibiu, Hermannstadt, je voudrais que nous réalisions des progrès tangibles en ce qui concerne le renforcement de notre politique étrangère. Il faudra renforcer notre capacité à parler d'une seule voix en matière de politique étrangère. Il n'est pas normal que l'Europe se réduise elle-même au silence lorsqu'au Conseil des droits de l'homme des Nations Unies à Genève, nous ne pouvons pas parler haut et fort pour condamner les violations des droits de l'homme en Chine parce qu'un État membre s'y est opposé. Je cite cet exemple, je pourrais en citer d'autres. C'est la raison pour laquelle aujourd'hui, la Commission vous propose à nouveau de passer au vote à la majorité qualifiée dans les domaines précis de nos relations extérieures. Je répète le message. Je répète un message que j'avais expliqué, détaillé l'année passée. Nous allons faire des propositions pour pouvoir procéder dans certains domaines, pas dans tous les domaines, en matière de politique étrangère, par majorité qualifiée. Le traité, tel qu'il est, permet au Conseil européen de prendre une décision dans ce sens. J'estime que le temps est venu de donner vie à la clause passerelle du traité de Lisbonne, permettant d'ouvrir la voie vers la prise de décision à la majorité qualifiée. Clause passerelle qui est la beauté dormante oubliée du traité. Je pense d'ailleurs, puisque nous y sommes, que pour certaines matières relevant de la fiscalité, nous devrions pouvoir décider également par majorité qualifiée. Un mot, Monsieur le Président, pour dire que d'autres façons de discuter de nos désaccords m'interpellent de plus en plus. Les échanges polémiques entre gouvernements, parfois entre institutions, se font de plus en plus nombreux. Mais ce ne sont pas les propos polémiques et souvent blessants qui permettent à la construction européenne d'avancer. Ce qui m'inquiète, ce n'est pas seulement une tonalité regrettable lorsque les forces politiques discutent entre elles. C'est vrai, c'est aussi vrai pour la façon dont certains traitent, parce qu'ils veulent mettre fin à tout débat, les médias et les journalistes. L'Europe doit rester une place où la liberté de la presse n'est pas remise en cause. De trop nombreux journalistes sont intimidés, attaqués, assassinés. Il n'y a pas de démocratie sans une presse libre. Merci d'applaudir, comme ça je peux boire. D'une façon générale, try again. D'une façon générale, nous devons, mesdames et messieurs, retrouver les vertus du compromis. Rechercher le compromis n'est pas une faiblesse, n'implique pas le sacrifice de nos convictions et n'empêche pas le libre débat qui respecte le point de vue des uns et des autres. La Commission s'oppose à toutes les atteintes à l'état de droit. Nous restons préoccupés par l'évolution des débats dans certains de nos États membres. L'article 7 doit s'appliquer là où l'état de droit est en danger. À cet égard, le premier vice-président Timmermans effectue un travail, je dois dire, remarquable, mais très souvent, trop souvent, solidaire pour défendre l'état de droit. Il bénéficie de mon ferme appui personnel et de celui de toute la Commission. Et puis, il y a un point sur lequel nous ne devons pas et nous ne pouvons pas déroger. Les arrêts de la Cour de justice de l'Union européenne doivent être respectés et être exécutés. L'Union européenne est une communauté de droit. Le respect de la règle de droit et le respect des décisions de justice ne sont pas une option, mais une obligation. Monsieur le Président, Mesdames, Messieurs, et pour beaucoup d'entre vous, chers amis, en introduisant non pas mon dernier discours, mais mon dernier discours sur l'état de l'Union européenne, je vous ai parlé de l'histoire, de la petite histoire qui couvre le mandat de cette commission et de la grande histoire qui est celle de l'Europe. Nous sommes tous, les uns et les autres, responsables de l'Europe telle qu'elle est. Et nous serons tous responsables, les uns et les autres, de l'Europe qui sera. L'histoire est ainsi faite. Les parlements et les commissions passent, l'Europe reste. Pour que l'Union européenne devienne ce qu'elle doit être, nous devons avoir à l'esprit plusieurs éléments. Je voudrais que l'Europe quitte les gradins du stade mondial. L'Europe ne doit pas être un spectateur, un commentateur des événements internationaux. Elle doit être un acteur constructif, un façonneur, un architecte du monde de demain. Il y a une forte demande d'Europe à travers le monde. Pour satisfaire à cette demande pressante, il faudra que sur la scène internationale, l'Europe s'exprime d'une seule voix. Dans le concert des nations, la voix de l'Europe doit être intelligible, compréhensible, distinguable pour être écoutée et entendue. Federica Mogherini a fait avancer la cohérence diplomatique de l'Union européenne comme on ne l'a jamais fait avant. Mais ne retombons jamais plus dans l'incohérence des diplomaties nationales concurrentes et parallèles. La diplomatie européenne doit être une et notre solidarité multilatérale doit être entière. Je voudrais que dorénavant, nous fassions de plus grands efforts pour rapprocher l'Est et l'Ouest de l'Europe. Mettons un terme à ce triste spectacle de la division intra-européenne. Notre continent et ceux qui ont mis fin à la guerre froide méritent mieux. Je voudrais que l'Union européenne prenne davantage soin de sa dimension sociale. Ceux qui ignorent les attentes justifiées des travailleurs et des petites entreprises font courir un grand risque à la cohésion de nos sociétés. Transformons les intentions du sommet de Göteborg en règles de droit. Je voudrais que les élections de l'année prochaine soient un grand moment pour la démocratie européenne. Je souhaite que l'expérience des Spitzenkandidats, des têtes de liste, petite avancée dans la démocratie européenne, soit renouvelée. Pour moi, cette expérience sera d'autant plus crédible le jour où nous aurons de véritables listes transnationales. Je crois que pour 2024, il faudra le faire. Surtout et avant tout, je voudrais que nous disions non au nationalisme malsain et que nous disions oui au patriotisme éclairé. Gardons à l'esprit que le patriotisme du XXIe siècle est à double dimension, l'une nationale, l'autre européenne, les deux ne s'excluant pas. J'aime, disait le philosophe français Blaise Pascal, les choses qui vont ensemble. Pour tenir sur leurs deux jambes, nation et Union européenne doivent marcher ensemble. Celui qui aime l'Europe doit aimer les nations qui la composent. Celui qui aime sa patrie doit aimer et peut aimer l'Europe. Le patriotisme est une vertu. Le nationalisme borné est un mensonge accablant et un poison pernicieux. En un mot, restons fidèles à ce que nous sommes. Plantons aujourd'hui les arbres, à l'ombre desquels nos arrière-petits-enfants, d'où qu'ils viennent, du nord, du sud, de l'ouest ou de l'est, puissent grandir et respirer en paix. Il y a quelques années, je vous ai dit, ici même, que l'Europe était la grande affaire de ma vie. Oui, j'aime l'Europe et je continuerai de le faire. Merci de m'avoir écouté.
Grazie, signor Presidente.
Thank you, President.
Caro Jean-Claude, nel corso
Jean-Claude,
del suo intervento
during the course of your
offerto molti
speech,
spunti, ha
you've
cercato di dare una prospettiva.
offered us a range of pointers. You've set out some prospects.
Servirà a rafforzare
In
alcune
the coming debate,
posizioni.
we'll
Io
be able to
credo
strengthen some of the
che il
positions.
Parlamento
I believe that Parliament,
nello scorcio finale di questa legislatura, dare un
in
suo contributo
the final
per
spurt of
accelerare
this
l'approvazione
parliamentary term,
di norme che sono ancora in
will
discussione.
be able to
Il Parlamento, come lei ha
confirm
detto,
a
non può e
number
non
of the
vuole
items still
essere
in the
capro
pipeline.
espiatorio.
As
I
you've
capri
said,
espiatori forse stanno
we
da
cannot
altre parti.
allow ourselves to be made scapegoats.
Il Parlamento vuole
Perhaps
essere
scapegoats
sempre
we found
più il cuore
elsewhere.
della democrazia. Ecco perché
We're
le
at the
chiedo
heart of
di cominciare a
democracy.
riflettere, per esempio, sulla
So
necessità
I would urge us to start by
di
thinking, for
dare al
example, about the
Parlamento il
need
potere di
for
iniziativa
Parliament
legislativa. Siamo
to
l'unico
have the
Parlamento
power
al
of
mondo
legislative initiative.
che
We're
non
the
ha
only Parliament
potere
in
di
the
iniziativa
world which
legislativa.
lacks that power to take the legislative initiative.
Lei ha giustamente sottolineato, è stato
You quite
accolto con un
rightly
applauso,
underscored, and this
il suo
was
riferimento
welcomed
alla
by a round of
necessità
applause,
di votazioni a
the
maggioranza.
need for
E quando
majority
parliamo di
voting.
immigrazione,
When we're
la
dealing with
proposta
migration,
della Commissione
the
e del
Commission's
Parlamento
proposal
sulla riforma di Dublino
and the
può essere
Parliament's
approvata a
proposal on
maggioranza.
the Dublin
Da parte del
reform
Consiglio
could be
c'è
adopted by the
sempre una
Council by a majority
resistenza,
vote, but there's
e se
always
fosse stata
resistance.
approvata quella riforma
If that
non
reform
ci
were
sarebbe stato il
passed,
caso di Sotti.
we wouldn't have had the SOTEU case in Italy. So having welcomed that proposal with massive applause that we moved to qualified voting, I assume there will be support for that initiative. And then all your initiatives regarding Africa are of great interest. They're heading in the right direction, in line with Parliament's wishes. We've called for a fund for Africa. Perhaps Europe has finally woken up very late in the day on the migration agenda. We're listening. If we'd listened to the appeals from a number of countries and groups a few years ago, we mightn't be where we are today. We need development of economic diplomacy, a stronger commitment on our part, because unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, has to be the main social issue we address. In the European Parliament, President, will be working intensively in the remaining months to come up with powerful responses for our citizens. In my capacity as President of Parliament, I'll use my best endeavours to ensure that our institution is ever closer to our citizens. The first speaker on behalf of the European People's Party is Manfred Weber.
Dear President, dear Commission President, dear colleagues, Europe is much more robust than 4 years ago. We overcame tough times. I think everybody can underline this. But without you, Jean-Claude, without your leadership, it would have been impossible to manage the last years. With your cool head, your determination, and your sincere heart for Europe, you defended the unity of this continent. And I want to thank you for this. And also, I want to thank you for the details of your love affair, which you shared with us in your final remarks. Thank you, Jean-Claude Juncker. But there is still a lot to do, and that is the main message of today's State of the Union speech. We are in a working session still. We have to deliver. And with today's announcements of Jean-Claude Juncker and the Commission, we can sum up that all the proposals the Commission promised at the beginning of their mandate are now on the table of Parliament and Commission. And I would also add, these were not only the proposals of the Commission at the beginning, that were the promises of the EPP candidate Jean-Claude Juncker in his election campaign. So to give a clear link between what you promised in the campaign last year and what you delivered under your leadership in the Commission. And also on the implementing part, we have to be aware that we delivered a lot. You mentioned already some of the figures which are on the table. On economy, stable growth rate, all the countries of the Eurozone below 3%. We have created a lot of millions of new jobs. Our companies did so. Mario Draghi gave now a clear signal that he will stop and finish the low interest rate policy until the end of this year. So having this in mind, it is a big success story. We have the Brexit. I can remember, Jean-Claude, when we were in your office after we got the messages from London about the outcome of the referendum, and we were disappointed. We were looking for answers, and we were a little bit scared about could others probably follow? Will others probably follow? Today, Europe is united and ready for a deal, but London cannot give us a clear answer, so the EU is united and London is in trouble. And finally, on migration, we reduced the numbers of arrivals, especially through the Mediterranean route, about more than 80% till 2015. So when you sum up all these things, some would probably say this listing up all the success stories is a boring exercise, and probably journalists are not so much interested. I would say it's not the case. I would say it is a precondition for the most important thing a politician can have, and that is trust from the people. We did it together. All the political families worked on this. I want to pick up only one aspect, because there is still a discussion going on how we rescued the euro. And yes, my party, the EPP party, is proud about what we did. It is about the policy of Enda Kenny, of Passos Coelho, of Mariano Rajoy, of Samaras, and of Anastasiadis in Cyprus. They did the necessary steps, and we rescued Europe and the euro with the policy we invented and we established. And we created growth and a good perspective for the future perspective of the people. And I cannot remember, let me say this on party political terms, I cannot remember that Hollande, Renzi, Dijsselbloem or even Moscovici presented any kind of an alternative proposal to how we should answer the challenge which was on the table. Dear colleagues, even Mr. Bullmann in the German government, with your contribution, with your party, I didn't saw any alternative proposal to present other strategies to overcome the crisis. Stable budgets and an ambitious reform program are necessary for a good economic future. That is what EPP believes in. But now let's look to the future. A Europe of people is first of all a Europe of security. That's why we welcome the proposal to present 10,000 Frontex officers to really contribute to a strong border control. Security means also still the fight against organized crime and criminals. Their data exchange is key for Europe, and I also want to underline that the Schengen area brings more security and not less security, and that's why we ask the Council to do further steps to include Bulgaria and Croatia inside of the Schengen area. They have waited for such a long time. It's now time to act. And I ask the Romanian government to stop the risks about the fight against corruption in Romania, because they are harming the decision-making process towards Bulgaria and Croatia in the same way. All three countries must have the right to join the Schengen area immediately. I want to underline this again. A second point for a Europe of people is a Europe of democracy, and that's why I thank you for the initiatives to make our European elections safe. Not Russia, not China, not any external power will decide, not trolls, not fake news, not Cambridge Analytics will decide, the people will decide, the Europeans will decide about the future of this continent. A third point for a Europe of people is a Europe of fairness. I'm considering what a truck driver is thinking when he's listening to the radio and they talk about the self-driving trucks. I think he's asking himself, what will happen to me? In such a world, we are standing in front of a revolution on the labor market. In such a world, we have to create a new fair deal for Europe. And that means, and I think we share all in this House, the general ideas, fair taxation, to contributions of the digital business sector to the future of this fair approach of a new social model. And today's Europe cannot be united, cannot be called united, having in mind that still the living conditions in the European Union are not equal. That's why I think we have to do more on common living conditions and living standards in the European Union. And finally, Europe of people is a Europe which is strong on global level. You showed in the Oval Office that we are strong, economically a giant, and we have to become also politically a giant. And that's why to change from the unanimous vote mechanism to the majority vote system is fully supported by the EPP. Let's stand up. Let's make the century a European one again. Crisis times are over. Now it's time for a more united Europe, for a more democratic Europe, and for a more ambitious Europe. Thank you so much.
Per il gruppo dell'Alleanza Progressista dei Socialisti e Democratici, la parola all'onorevole Bullmann.
Dear President of the Commission, you started the mandate by promising that you will be a politician, a political leader of the college. And even those who tend to criticize you on a daily basis, as I do, of course only if it's really necessary, have to admit you are a political leader of the European Commission. Chapeau. You are not the porte-parole of the national capitals, and you are paying tribute to the decency of this political role in Europe. By doing so, you are making a huge difference to the predecessor of your own political family, which I appreciate. But this is not the issue at stake today. The issue is not whether you or whether the college consists of dedicated Europeans. We are convinced of that, otherwise we would have not voted for you. The very question at stake is whether or not our institution, our policies are already fit, are already up to the task on which we have to deliver in these days. Yes, we are in an era of huge crisis. Manfred Weber, I do not think that we already have overcome crisis. Think of migration, you mentioned it. Think on climate change. Think of deepening divides between North and South and East and West. No, we are in transformational periods, and to put it in the words of Pope Francis at the beginning of your mandate, he said, this is not an era of change, this is a change of the era. And the very question which we discuss in our political group is, why can't we go more radical? Why can't we go for a more clearer policy change to live up to that? Migration. You mentioned it. And we fully-hearted support what you were saying. What takes me wonder, Manfred Weber was reminding us on the fact that you were the PPE candidate for the last competition. Why is it that once you are talking about migration, you only have the applause of the left side of this house and all the others are silent? I am wondering, why is that? And I cannot understand, because what he says is the task of today. Yes, we have to open legal ways for migration. It's a scandal. We say it's a scandal what we witnessed again in this summer in the Mediterranean. It's disgusting to see people drowning, even that the official mission of the European Union does not have any safe harbors anymore because of the Italian government, the right-wing Italian government. And this is the mission of the Commission's president, who was the EPP candidate for the last decision-making for this mandate. So please take note of that when you are going to prepare the summit in September 19th and discuss his proposals and come to urgent action. This is what we expect from the Council. Friends, we will only be able to put it in a broader picture if we reach out to the societies of the East. Yes, they need a new compact. They have an interest beyond Bratislava, Jean-Claude Juncker, beyond Bratislava. They have a dear interest in safe energy. They have an interest in cohesion, long-lasting cohesion, and in re-industrialization of their countries. And they deserve it. The workers in the East countries deserve a decent future. And we have to set up a new compact. And I'm deeply convinced that then it will be easier to also solve the migration question. Let us talk about the South. It is not bearable that 50%, 50% of the young people in the South are without any perspective. We have to set up a new master plan for the South. Why not? This could be done by the Commission in the last months of this mandate. Why not propose a new master plan, building on the investment plan of Jean-Claude Juncker, extending that to the South and giving back future and hope to the southern countries, and to make them again the marketplaces of new ideas, the bridge builders to the cultures that are in our neighborhood. That would be a very important task, and we would encourage you to do so. But it's not only the societies and the East and the South that are falling apart. Look at the North. Look at Brexit. We back, of course, the position totally of the Commission, and we stand united on that. But look at Brexit. Look at the Swedish elections, and you see that ordinary people, that working class people who have invested their hope on Europe would like to see us delivering on top of our agenda one proposal. Why does the Commission not come forward with the proposal that each and every child in the European Union has a child guarantee, deserves free health care, deserves proper education, deserves decent housing? That could be a proposal of the next forthcoming months to unite the European Union for a new future of the next generation. This is what we propose. You are right, we need the defense of our institution. We need to fight against our enemies who would like to undermine our democracy. Cambridge Analytica all the enemies from the outside as well as the enemies from the inside. And yes, we need to strengthen the community method. For the last months of your mandate, good luck, bon courage.
Per il gruppo dei conservatori e riformisti, la parola all'onorevole
Reformist, Mr. Legutko has the floor.
Mr. President, it was a very interesting speech. I expect it would be more of a summing up speech. And I was just wondering what will be the proportion between pluses and minuses. Of course, on the plus side, I would put the Juncker plan, which you mentioned en passant, but I think which was has been a success. But there is also a minus side to it. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is of course immigration and demographic crisis. Of course, you did not do it directly. It was Chancellor Merkel who opened the European borders, but you could have prevented her, at least try to prevent her. I don't know with what effect, but at least you could have. Now, we can, of course, subscribe to the idea of strengthening European borders, but I think it's a somewhat belated proposal. I mean, we could have talked about it some time ago. Instead, we spent a couple of years on imposing the solution that was absurd from the very beginning, the mandatory relocation. And there was a lot of energy spent on it, a lot of bad blood was shed, and the typical share of bullying and invectives were thrown around. So, but the real question is that you should ask yourself, and we all should ask ourselves, is the European Union in a better shape now than it was when you took office? And I think the answer is clear. No. With all due respect, President Juncker, and all the successes that you had, no. There has never been a time in the history of European integration where Europe was more disunited than it is now. You talked about unity. No, the unity is no longer there. It doesn't mean World War I or World War II. Until recently, integration was one-way street. Now it's two-way street. The number of people who are dissatisfied, deeply dissatisfied with the European project is increasing. That's why our colleagues, my colleagues too, are somewhat nervous before the elections, because they do not know what will happen. They're afraid of a possible political earthquake. And you cannot say that the European Commission has no share in it and no responsibility. There is at least political responsibility. I mean, come on, there is some relation between cause and effect. It's not the fact that there are so many people who have been antagonized, made angry, irritated, marginalized, bullied, rejected. The number is so high that you cannot neglect it, and you cannot decline any responsibility for that. You, not as a person, but you as a chief of the important European institution. So I would say that we have to somehow roll back this process. When you mentioned that you wanted to have qualified majority votes in more areas of policy, public life in Europe, I mean, you are in for more trouble, because that will petrify this system in which there are some actors are equal and some are more equal than others, in which the decision-making process is extremely obscure. Nobody knows who makes the decision. And the division between North and South, East and West, it's still there. So if you want to have more trouble, go along this path. And this will be extremely interesting situation after the election. I mean, to what extent you will be responsive to the signals? You are a charming man, President Juncker, and I love listening to you. But when you were talking today, I thought, my God, we are living in two different worlds. I wonder which one is the true one.
On behalf of the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe, Mr. Verhofstadt has the floor.
I first want to react to Mr. Legutko. It's terrifying what he is saying. He's saying here that we were never so disunited as today, as he has forgotten what Europe was between the two world wars, as he has forgotten what Europe was in the Cold War. You have never heard about the wall and the Berlin Wall and the Iron Curtain? Europe is united now. It's not Mr. Legutko, it's not Mr. Legutko, you have another vision. You say I'm of another world than Mr. Juncker. Well, very well. For me, no problem. But doesn't say things that are completely crazy in a continent that have seen 20 million of death and victims because of nationalism and populism as you defend it today. That's the point. And I have to tell you, I didn't want to start, Jean-Claude, with this, but I find it so terrifying that somebody gives us here lessons about unity in Europe and then trying with his government to do against the rule of law, against a number of other things that are against European values. Sorry. But I want to applaud, sorry. But I didn't want to start. I wanted to start with applaud the State of the Union of Jean-Claude Juncker. And especially a part that nobody has spoken about until now in the interventions, and is the part on Africa, Jean-Claude. Because you're right, I think. You have done a clear proposal. They don't need charity. What they need is a true partnership between us and we. And I think it's possible to create what I call the biggest economic and trade area in the world. Because if Europe does that with Africa, it will become and is already the biggest trade area. And it will also, in my opinion, be a true alternative for Africa, for the African citizens, for the African people, to the takeover by the Chinese, what is happening every day, every week, in every investment today in Africa. So I think that this Parliament has to support you in this goal. The question for me is a little bit different than the question of the other groups' leaders. The question is, last year, you gave us your legacy. You repeated it this year. And the question is, can we put that into reality in the coming years, this legacy of you? That's the question. In this existential year of elections, with a number of threats, let's be honest, the rise of nationalists, populists is everywhere in Europe. We have a number of authoritarian leaders. Yeah, thank you. To support me, like Mr. Kaczynski, like Mr. Orban, who in fact hijacking our European parties. I think they do a little bit what Trump is doing in the Republican Party. But let's be honest, and your voice is only an affirmation of this. The inconvenient truth is that the alt-right in Europe is trying to undermine this European Union and is in fact trying to take over the European politics from within, and to do exactly the opposite than the agenda that Jean-Claude Juncker has presented us today. And for that reason, I think, and I think that everybody of us, certainly Manfred is aware of this, that in a few moments, the vote we're going to have, it's so important that all pro-Europeans are united against this alt-right, authoritarian tendency that we see in a number of our countries. Because leading the European Union, dear friends, is not only a question of mathematical strength, it's also a question of moral authority. And this moral authority is at stake for the moment in the European Union. Then, in the same spirit, Mr. Juncker, I want to ask you a specific thing for the Commission that you mentioned very shortly, but I want to go more in detail. I want to ask that the Commission in the coming months would introduce a package of proposals, specific proposals, and specific measures to protect our elections against the foreign meddling that we have already seen in other continents and in other places in Europe. Identifying, for example, foreign agents who are active on the European social media platforms, as well as the extremist politicians with whom they are colluding. In the US, in the United States, there have been a special counsel appointed, as you all know, Robert Mueller, to investigate in the Russian interference in elections, and they have already launched dozens of indictments that be handed down. Well, I think we need to catch up the fastest as possible by also establishing our own special prosecutor to investigate and to stop all disinformation also in Europe, and certainly before it is too late in the light of the European elections we will have next year. And my special request to you, if the Commission could take an initiative to this and to bring it to the table of the Council and to the table of the European Parliament. And then finally, my last point, I want to support you in one thing. I think that the most important point of your intervention was the point that you have made about the end of the use, or better, the end of unanimity and the use of the clause de passerelle. It's a French word. It was the most important proposal. And my proposal is, Jean-Claude, be ambitious. Put all fields, all articles of the treaty that are possible in your proposal of the clause de passerelle. Because I'm pretty sure that at the other side of the table in the Council, there will be a number of them who will not be in agreement with you. And it's all based, the best thing to ask the maximum as possible in politics. Start with 100%. Say, I want the end of unanimity inside the European Union, because it's the main problem for the moment to decide a number of things. For example, the migration package, Mr. President, as you have mentioned, where the Council is not capable even to decide, even when it is with a qualified majority. So my proposal is, be ambitious, put the whole package in it, all fields of foreign policy, all fields, for me, taxation also. Put everything in it, and we will see what will be the end game if we support you. You have said, and that will be my conclusion, that this was, in fact, the Commission of the last chance. You remember that, 4 years ago. And I'm always asking myself, what can come after the Commission of the last chance in the coming years? So I think what will come is something different. The Commission that we need in the future, dear colleagues, will be more than that. It will be a type of a new, renewed European government, what we need. With one task, that is to realize further the legacy of Jean-Claude Juncker. And also the other visions that have been laid down the latest months, for example, by the French President in his Sorbonne speech. That will be the task of this new Commission. And that is also the task we will offer to the electorate, as our group, as our movement, as a real European alternative on your legacy towards the nationalist and the populist inside and outside of this House. Thank you.
Now, on behalf of the Greens EFA Group, Ska Keller has the floor.
Thank you, President. You yourself and many colleagues have looked at the challenges that we have globally, and I totally agree with them. We have a lot of challenges. We have problems, to say the least, in our transatlantic partnership. We have China rising up. There's so many challenges out there. But I would argue that more threatening than anything that the world can throw at us are actually the enemies from the inside. And they are the obvious ones, the nationalists that bring hatred, division, the racists that spread fear and hate. But there's also some less obvious. It's the decision makers that actually don't take decisions, that want to keep the status quo, who just want to keep their own privileges and who are just closing their eyes at what's at stake. And then there's parties and governments, of which unfortunately we have more and more, who use the European Union as a scapegoat for all their own failures and that are cutting away for democracy, at civil liberties, bit by bit and piece by piece. But a Europe united, a Europe that knows what it stands for, can face all external problems and can be a front runner and a shining example in the world. We can be strong if we don't make ourselves weak. And Europe has promised to its citizens to bring peace, prosperity, and democracy. And those promises are still very relevant, but we need to renew them and we need to bring them to fulfillment. And on peace, we have major achievements to show, but we cannot rest on laurels and Norwegian medals. There are new global challenges ahead that threaten our future and that threaten our security. And the biggest one of them is climate change. We have seen it this summer, that climate change is happening. It's happening now, and it's happening everywhere. From disastrous harvests to forest fires, there's no way anyone could possibly deny that. And the good news about climate change is that we know what to do. And the bad news about climate change is that we don't do it. But with Trump leading the US into space rather than forward, we cannot wait as Europeans for someone else to protect our planet. No, we have to do it ourselves, and there's no time to lose. And there the Commission has been way too timid in the past 5 years, I have to say. It is now that we need a very quick change to renewables and phasing out of the climate killer coal. And if climate protection truly is a priority, then it should also be a priority in the multi-annual budget. It should also be a priority in the agricultural reform. And agriculture is both a victim as well as a culprit in climate change. But farmers can also be part of the solution. And here's where the Commission should have been more ambitious with the agricultural reform. The European Union has also always promised prosperity, but we are far away from the AAA rating that we should have, I agree, on social policies. And the austerity imposed on member states in the past without regards to consequences and also without regards to whether this would actually help anything, that has seriously undermined the European promise of increasing living standards. But increasing the quality of life, that's not just some minor thing that you can forget about. It's an essence of policy making. And we need to renew this promise and build a social Europe. And one not just of nice declarations like we've seen from Gothenburg. We need not just nice intentions, that's all very nice, but we need a social Europe with real facts and real figures. We need common minimum social standards in Europe. All citizens must get full access to social protection, to housing and to medical care. A framework directive on adequate minimum income schemes can create such a safety net as well, and here it would be very interesting to see a proposal by the Commission so that we can ensure that safety net for everyone and not just for a lucky few. And Europe has promised democracy, rule of law and civil liberties to all its citizens. And that was a very strong call for all the countries that wanted to join, for all the people living under dictatorships who were being deprived from freedoms, like the country where I myself was born. And our continent has a long and bloody history of oppressions, of tanks rolling against protesters, of people suffering in prison camps. And it's only thanks to those courageous people who were marching for freedom, who were marching for democracy, who did not give up, that today in the European Union we have that democracy, we have those civil liberties, and we have freedom. But those very big successes, they are under threat. And we need to fight for them again every single day. Because inside Europe, today, judges are being dismissed, corruption is being legalized, newspapers are closed, universities harassed, and civil society treated as criminals. And this is not a detail. This is a threat to all of us. And again, today as well, courageous people are standing up, marching for human rights, their own rights and the rights of their neighbors, and they're marching for freedom, be it in Sicily or Romania, be it in Chemnitz or be it in Pirin. And they defend democracy, they defend humanity, and they defend Europe. And we see as well that if we stand up together, then we really have power. then we are really strong together. And I think more now than ever, it is now the task and responsibility of all of us to take a stance, to take up all of our responsibilities. We have responsibilities, you as President of the Commission, we all as members of the European Parliament, but all Europeans from north to south, from east to west. Because if Europe loses on democracy, then it will lose itself. And this is about more than about one country or another country. This is about the achievements on this continent that so many people have even died for. This is about our true self, the true self of Europe. And it is time to take a stance. Thank you.
Please, we need to respect the timing. A nome del gruppo confederale
On behalf of the Confederal Group of the European United Left and Nordic Green Left, Ms. Zimmer has the floor.
Vielen Dank, Herr
Thank
Präsident.
you very much, President.
Herr Juncker,
Mr. Juncker,
Sie haben heute, glaube ich, mit
today,
einer sehr
I think,
intensiven Rede
you delivered a very intensive speech, giving your political position with which you have exercised the office of Commission President. I'd like to express my respect for that. I think it makes it easier for us to speak about what, from the point of view of the various political groups in the European Union, what should be different. I'd like to start with the evaluation of whether we are in a position where we can say we've got over the crisis. We're in a position where we are girded for all the challenges of the future, that we're prepared so that people have the feeling of social security, of solidarity, of a community in the European Union. I'm saying to you no very clearly. Yesterday, when the Greek Prime Minister was here, one sentence was very clear, very demonstrative. He said, "We're out of the memorandum. We've survived." When he says we've survived, if that's the result of a policy which has been shaped by the Union and the Commission, a sort of crisis management which is on the backs of the poorest and has meant that inequality has become deeper and that we don't have the safety, the security, that we can look to the future. We all have the feeling that in the upcoming elections there's something facing us where we can say today we have to deflect it because we want to have a Europe of solidarity, of peace, and there's a whole lot of issues where we have to say today's policies, it won't work like that. We have to see that 10 years after the start of the financial crisis, the level of prosperity of the pre-crisis era has not been reached in many countries, and people are not benefiting from growth. The rights of workers in many countries have been severely cut. We must give a signal that these rights and the protection of employees and those who are not in any job, that we get them back, that we strengthen them, that we accept that is part of it, part of being the European Union. And we don't want that the promised social AAA becomes a AAA for a future military strength of the European Union. It can't be that we're taking money from the European budget for the fund that you're talking about. The heading that you used, showing strength and showing strength to the outside and protecting citizens, and reminds me of the Austrian presidency. They're saying a Europe that protects, and they're making it very clear. It's not about a social union. It's not about that at all. There's no specific goal in the description of this presidency. It's about protecting the external borders and turning away refugees and this humanitarian catastrophe that we've seen in the summer. is being continued. I'm very thankful that you said where the problem lies and who is blocking. And I think that as a parliament, we must make it very clear that we need Dublin, that we shouldn't accept that the Council is constantly blocking and they're simply descending into inactivity. The Commission, what you expect from the Commission, say this loud and clear. For activists and actors, they don't know where the causes lie, who they can turn to, who they can fight with together. If we don't know who is responsible for what responsibilities are borne by the individual institutions. We must make that very clear. Otherwise, we can't win over voters who can't get over this lethargy when it comes to fighting for Europe. We must tackle that together. There must be a mission. And then we'll differentiate ourselves in the left from all right-wing attempts to destroy Europe. I wanted to stress that.
Of the EFTD, Mr. Farage has the floor.
Mr. Juncker, what a picture you paint. A European Union of peace, of prosperity, of contentedness. And as you said, you're trying to make it a little more perfect every day. Well, it's a very good advertising slogan, but tell you what surprised me. Since your last State of the Union speech, there's been a seismic political event in Europe, perhaps one even on a par with Brexit. Italy, a founding member of the Union, the third biggest economy in the Eurozone, now has a coalition government between the Five Stars and Malega that is polling over 60% of the vote and is posing a direct challenge, both in terms of the management of the Eurozone and indeed how the migration crisis is handled. You made no acknowledgement of that at all. No acknowledgement of the populist revolt that is sweeping through virtually every single member state. Instead, you're to carry on regardless. And I noted your continued use of the phrase sovereign Europe. What you're talking about is a deeper centralisation of power, a centralisation of power in terms of Europe's foreign policy, a centralisation of power, as you first laid out last year, in terms of building a European army, more power at the centre for taxation. All of this, of course, meaning less to be done at the nation-state level. And now, another 10,000 European border guards paving the way for a federal border police in Europe. Well, I tell you something, if you've got problems with the Italians now, you ain't seen nothing yet when you put that proposal to them. But it's all about centralisation. Power, power, power. But here's the funny thing. You appealed to our sense of European patriotism. So why is it that patriotism at the nation-state level is considered to be insular, bad, nasty, xenophobic, probably racist into the bargain? And yet, patriotism at a European level is a good and a virtuous thing. And I'm afraid this idea of European patriotism, this idea of putting that flag above their own nation-state flag is for the birds. People do not have a profound sense of European identity. They have a sense of national identity. And in a way, that is the great dividing line between your vision of Europe and that increasingly that is being said by the electors. We wish to live in nation states. Now on Brexit, Mr Juncker, on the Irish border already there are huge differences between the north and the south, differences of politics, of tax, of currency and of law, and we manage. And if we can get to a free trade deal, well, of course, there'll be no difficulties whatsoever. And I thought you had some very positive things to say. You said our vote to leave was a vote to leave the single market and its associated parts. I agree with you. Quite why Mrs May at Chequers wants to opt back into much of it, I don't know. But you said twice that we need to come to a free trade deal. It's what European exporters want. And it is, absolutely. And it's what we want. Surely now, the time is right. The ground is prepared for a Canada Plus style trade deal between you and between us. We leave political union, but we carry on doing business on a tariff-free basis. We want it. Increasingly, I think that you want it. Let's get Brexit sorted. And Mr Verhofstadt, you'll be happy. You'll see the back of us.
On behalf of the Europe of Nations and Freedoms Group, Mr. Bay. Mr. Juncker, 4 years after your Commission came into office and less than a year before the European elections, we have to take stock. And clearly, you are, in the Commission, a condensed form of everything that the people of Europe can no longer stand. Your Commission's action is opaque, anti-democratic and unclear. It's opaque when you decide by executive fiat to appoint Mr. Zellmeyer as Secretary General of the Commission. You, Mr. Juncker, flouted all the rules. It's against democracy when Commissioner Oettinger, in an extraordinarily arrogant statement, said that the financial market would teach the Italians the proper way to vote. And it's also against democracy when just now you stated that the EU budget would be pinned down up to 2027 without waiting to see what our citizens say in the elections May next year. And you've been punitive towards Poland and Hungary. We saw a fine example of a Stalinesque show child just yesterday, just because they've been brave enough to stand up for the values of our civilization, and they refuse the compulsory quotas of migrants that you wanted to impose on them. You've also been punitive towards the British. You want to make them pay the price of their freedom by refusing any sort of trade agreement with them. When we have countries who are not in the EU, such as Norway and Iceland, who have access to the single market, and you're increasing this welter of trade agreements all around the world, you're going to refuse that to the British? And of course, the work of your Commission has been characterized by the way you sped up the dismantlement of any kind of economic protection. You've been encouraging unfair competition within Europe, with the posting of workers, and with the wider world with free trade agreements with a severe impact on the environment, undermining our industry, our farming industry. It applies to the CETA and future agreements with Oceania, and off you went to Turkey the other day without the opinion or let alone any input from the European Parliament or the national parliaments to sign up to a prior agreement on free trade with Japan. And I see, of course, your Commission has been characterized by its crazy migration policy. Our colleague, Mr. Legutko, just now underscored the point very moderately, yet nonetheless he found Mr. Verhofstadt striking him down with a thunderbolt, attacking populists. But within this chamber, he is the picture of hatred of any different thinking from his own. We've just seen another demonstration of that. Your Commissioner Avramopoulos talked about migration, saying that you gearing towards accepting migrants as something that's vital for our continent's socio-economic future. And you've talked about increasing illegal migration even more. That is undoubtedly your greatest political folly. You've made it possible for people to organize this mass immigration, which is weakening our continent and leading to the suffering of our peoples. The President. The next speaker is Mr. Uzajdowski, a non-attached member.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I want to start by thanking President Juncker for his speech. I appreciate your pragmatism, your principle that it is better to be efficient and effective in small matters and careful in big matters, contrary to the socialists who demand financing of new jobs from the European level. So I appreciate your pragmatism. But what I missed in your speech is supporting our free market. I missed in your speech calls for doing away with protectionism in Europe and supporting of small and medium-sized enterprises. Contrary to Mr. Farage, who took the floor maybe 3 minutes before me, I would be in favor of Europe taking more responsibility for our defense policy. I have been watching this process with a great interest. I think Europe should share with the US responsibility for our defense, but this needs practical solidarity. Europeans must feel that Europe will defend Eastern Europe with the same vigor that with which it defends Southern Europe, and that Europe would not tolerate counterproductive initiatives like Nord Stream 2. Thank you.
Signor Presidente della Commissione, lei nel corso del suo
President of the
intervento
Commission, during the course of your
ha
speech,
ricordato il ruolo
you
dei
reminded
giornalisti
us
come
of the role
garanti
of
dello
journalists
Stato di diritto.
as people who uphold
Ancora una
the
volta
state of
voglio
law.
ricordare in
Once
quest'Aula,
again,
visto che ancora non si
I would like to remind the
sono
House
scoperti i mandanti degli assassini di due
that
giornalisti.
the murderers of
Io
two
voglio ricordare
journalists Daphne Caruana Galizia,
assassinata a Malta,
who was murdered in Malta, and Jan Kuciak, murdered in Slovakia, have still not been found. Until such time as we establish who hired them, we will continue to speak out against the course of events.
Presidente Juncker ha la parola.
President Juncker has the floor.
Monsieur le Président, Mesdames, Messieurs, je me limiterai à quelques propos très brefs en répondant à des questions concrètes qui m'ont été posées. Je commencerai par Monsieur Bullmann, qui a attiré notre attention sur la nécessité qu'il y avait de développer davantage les droits des enfants et les droits sociaux d'une façon générale. Je voudrais rappeler ici que la Commission a proposé dans le cadre du processus dit de Göteborg exactement une action de ce type. C'est le chapitre 3, point numéro 11. Et je rappelle aussi, je le dis à Madame Keller, que j'ai plaidé aujourd'hui comme hier pour que la déclaration de Göteborg ne reste pas un poème, mais pour que nous transformions des intentions en actes, y compris en actes législatifs. Je dirais à mon ami Verhofstadt, auquel d'ailleurs il convient de s'adresser avec un minimum de politesse, que la Commission a aujourd'hui adopté un texte sur la protection des électeurs européens, des candidats européens, des partis politiques dans le cadre des prochaines élections européennes. Donc tout cela est en bonne voie. Je dirais à M. Farage qu'il faut écouter avant de parler. Je n'ai pas mis sur un point, sur le même plan, patriotisme national et patriotisme européen. J'ai dit l'un n'exclut pas l'autre. Et je continuerai à être patriote, mais un patriote éclairé. Mon petit patriotisme grand-ducal n'est dirigé contre personne. J'aime mon pays, mais je ne déteste pas les autres. Et si vous dites que nous vivons dans deux mondes différents, ce n'est pas M. Farage qui l'a dit, mais un orateur précédent, oui, je ne veux pas vivre dans ce monde fait de rejet, dans ce monde fait de haine. Je ne veux pas vivre dans ce monde. Je préfère le mien qui est aussi le vôtre. Je vous remercie.
Grazie. La parola a nome del Consiglio.
Thank you. Now, on behalf of the Council, Ms. Edstadler has the floor.
President Juncker, President Tajani, honourable members, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Council, let me first of all thank President Juncker for his address and for his analysis regarding the challenges, but also the opportunities facing our Union at this crucial juncture as we approach the end of the legislature. I won't be able to go into all the detailed elements of President Juncker's speech, and his considerations deserve a careful examination. Obviously, he touched upon issues that are at the center of our attention. But let me turn to something else at the outset. I would like to stress that I fully second what President Juncker stated at the beginning of his speech. Our union is a union of peace. It is a union of prosperity, and we should show respect towards this union, deal with it carefully, and protect our common values. Now let me turn to some issues touched. For instance, the idea of further strengthening Frontex. It is an important element of a functioning EU policy on migration. It was already discussed at the European Council in June, and it will be a main topic for the discussions at the informal Heads of State or Government Summit in Salzburg. And yes, the strengthening of Frontex is in our view a precondition to establish a resilient and well-based European asylum system. We hope to find as much as possible a common ground and to bring things forward. The European Council in June also reconfirmed the necessity of bringing our cooperation with Africa to a new level. A visible expression of this aim will be a high-level forum which we are currently planning to hold in Vienna at the beginning of December. And as far as the proposal on summertime is concerned, we are planning to put that on very quickly on the agenda of the Council. Given the specific political context before the end of the current legislative term, there is indeed a need to concentrate on the delivery of pending proposals and on the effective implementation of legislation. Be assured that the Austrian presidency's energy and determination is fully focused on this. In recent months, there have been developments which may on surface seem contradictory. There is much talk about Euroscepticism and concerns in this respect ahead of next year's election of the European Parliament. Yet, at the same time, we have seen positive signs on renewed trust and higher levels of support for the Union. For our part, as presidency, we are confident that there is enough unity and determination in Europe to tackle these challenges ahead and to transfer them into opportunities. Our motto is a Europe that protects, and this is what we try to contribute. I think this motto could also apply to a series of elements of President Juncker's speech today. Europe has emerged stronger in many ways from the crisis we have faced in recent years. But now we need to act swiftly and determinedly on the economy, on migration, on security, and on digital Europe. Especially cybercrime, the increasing number of cyber attacks and the crucial questions on cybersecurity must be discussed diligently. We will strive to use the efforts of digitalization on the one hand at its best, and on the other hand, we have to deal carefully with the possible negative effects. The goal must be a secure, stable, single digital market and the highest trust of its consumers, of the civils of Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, addressing you in this hemicycle in July, Chancellor Kurz presented to you the priorities of our presidency, namely security and the fight against illegal migration, securing prosperity and competitiveness through digitalization and stability in the European neighborhood. I will not go through these principles and priorities again. They focus on achieving tangible results through demonstrating to European citizens the EU's indispensable added value for its citizens and member states. And of course, this is particularly important in this period as we near the end of the legislature. As President Juncker mentioned, we have a lot of work to do in the coming months in terms of legislation, but there are of course also the informal meetings of the head of state or government in Salzburg next week, and the European Council meetings in October and in December, in which crucial decisions will have to be made. And beyond our presidency, the European election, of course, and the informal meeting in Sibiu in May 2019, when the implementation of the leaders' agenda will be reviewed and the strategic agenda for the period 2019 to 2024 will be prepared. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, speaking of delivering on priority policies, I would also note that today's debate on the State of the Union is a key moment in a new annual cycle of programming. Now, the General Affairs Council at its meeting on 18 September will have an exchange of views on the basis of the Commission's letter of intent, which was issued only yesterday. We also look forward to continuing the fruitful dialogue among the three institutions on priorities, particularly on implementation of the joint declaration on the EU's legislative priorities for 2018 and 2019. Delivering results can be achieved in a focused and targeted way through our joint programming. Let me reaffirm